Sometimes you have to come up and see if that works. No, it doesn't. Okay.
This is going to be bad audio, but let me know if that works. Okay. But yeah, hi. Awesome. So you can hear me on Instagram. It's just everywhere else you may not be able to hear me. Um, and we will have to fix that for everyone else. Oh, perfect. So everyone can hear me now. Thank you so much. Um, so I was saying that we're going to be talking about the visa bulletin, and basically what the visa bulletin is. The State Department every single month puts out a visa bulletin letting people know when their visa could be ready, right? If you are waiting for like a preference category, meaning let's say you are the adult child of a US citizen and you're waiting for your visa appointment and you're not sure when it's going to be your turn, the visa bulletin is your best friend, right? The visa bulletin tells you when you are good to go, when you can start applying for your visa and putting together that process of eventually getting your visa. So every single month they put this out, basically letting us know where they think they are for the month, right? Who they think can actually get a visa that month. And for most people, again, if you are in the process of a visa, you probably know what the visa bulletin is, and you are most likely stalking the visa bulletin because I do. Every single month, there's an update. I am there. Finding out exactly what is going on because it changes every single month. So let's talk about what changed. If you are in an F2A category, meaning you are, when you look at the visa bulletin, it will tell you exactly where you are and what your visa category is. So the F2A category actually moved. Okay, it typically doesn't move that much, but it moved by 1 month. Meaning, if you filed your application as of March 1st, 2025, you are in a better position now because they moved forward to April 1st, 2025. So anyone that filed their application before April 1st, 2025 is now able to apply for their visa. If they're in the US, they may be able to apply for adjustment of status with USCIS. So that is a good thing when the worldwide things move. Okay. For F4, which barely moves. Okay, the F4 category barely moves because there's so many applications and a tiny bit of visas available for that category. So it doesn't always move, but guess what? It moves by 3 months. So it went from September 8th, 2008 to January 1st, 2009. So that's a whole group of people that are now going to be able to apply for their visa. So this is such a big deal when things move. I feel like every single every single month, people are asking me as the F4 category moves. And then when you look at the visa bulletin, there's the worldwide visa bulletin and then there's specific country visa bulletins. Because if you are from China, India, or Mexico or the Philippines, your visa bulletin numbers are going to be different from the worldwide visa bulletin numbers, okay? Because there's such a backlog for those specific countries that get their own specific dates. That's how bad it is. But what I can tell you is that for the F4, there was a move for India as well, not just the worldwide and China, but also India got a move on the F4 category of 3 months. So that is major. That's going to change some lives. All right. For the employment based, so we've been talking about family based categories. For employment based, there was a move, but not the move we want. Okay? So we want, when there's a move, to be additional people that can apply. But for the employment based category EB2, I'm sorry, EB4 category, it actually became unavailable. So it retrogressed, meaning the State Department thought they had enough to be current, right? They had enough to cover everyone that applied. Then they're going through their process, they realized, no, we don't actually have enough visas. So now we're going to move the date backwards instead of forward. So we don't like that, right? It makes it so that people that thought they were close to the end now have to wait even longer. So that's a big, big one. Another big thing that happened is that, again, the visas still an issue, right? If you are trying to file for a non-immigrant visa, just know, depending on the country you're in, you may not even be able to apply for a visa, or you may be one of those countries that have a limitation on how long you can stay in the US, how many entries you can have with your visa. I know I talked about this the last time I was on live, but now countries that only get one entry with their visa. So every single time someone from that country gets a B1, B2 visa, enters the US and leaves, they have to get a new visa, right? Every single time they leave the US, they have to now get a new visa. That is going to cause so much backlogs for embassies that already don't have enough staff in those specific countries to get you a visa interview. So for example, in Nigeria, they are scheduled out for B1, B2 visas. They're in 2027. We're in 2025, and their B1, B2 visas are scheduled out to 2027. So that is going to cause such a huge backlog, because now every single person that's applying enters the US, now they have to get back in line for a new visa. It is going to cause people to not be able to plan, especially companies send employees to the US, because there's no exception to this rule. Except for some diplomats, there's no exceptions to this rule. So if you have a company that's, for example, in Nigeria, in Ghana, and you want them, you know, every single year, you know, you have a conference that you have employees that need to attend those conferences, and their B1, B2 is the way you get them to the US, you may be in a situation where you're not able to plan ahead of time, and you may not even know which employees will get a visa or even a visa appointment to then know which employees can go to this training or conference or whatever is going on in the US you want your company represented at. Okay, so it is going to cause some shifts for some companies, and that shift may be now them doing more things in Europe, in other countries that are not the US. All right, so I'm just going to pause here and take some questions. If you have questions, put them in the comments, okay? Do not wait, put your questions in the comments. All right. Question: had an interview on July 29th for I-130 and I-485. When they found out it was rescheduled for September 3rd. Weird thing about this, security stated they know why it was rescheduled, but can that nervous there, but I wasn't the only one. It was about 10 couples that were also there. Okay. So if it's not, when cases get rescheduled, if it is not, you know, just your case that's scheduled, it's probably a USCIS backend issue. It probably has nothing to do with your case, okay? Because when USCIS reschedules, depending on what the situation is, it's probably on that. Okay. If it's something to do with your case, they typically will try to tell you the day before. Maybe the officer wasn't in that day, or something happened and they just don't have access to certain files. That can be the situation. So it may not be anything to do with your specific case. I've had a case where we had an interview scheduled the day of. Before I left the office to head out to the interview, I got a phone call telling me they have to reschedule the interview. Why do they have to reschedule the interview? Because the officer did not have the file. Okay, so remember, when you file your case, it goes to a service center, and then the service center sends it to the field office where the officer actually does the interview. If the field office doesn't get the file in time, the interview is not happening. Okay, they need to be able to have the file, have access to everything they need in order to do the interview. And whichever officer is assigned to the case has to also be available. So sometimes it has nothing to do with you. It's probably something to do with USCIS backend issues, especially if you're saying that 10 other couples were rescheduled for that same day. Just know it's probably not you. But typically, when it's a case-specific issue, it's probably just you that gets rescheduled. When it's multiple people, it's a USCIS thing. Okay. So don't be too nervous. They did schedule you, which is usually the hardest part. When they cancel an interview, getting them to reschedule the interview is typically the hard part. But since they already rescheduled it, that means whatever the issue is, they know it will be solved on that day. Okay. But is it stressful? Absolutely. Absolutely. It is so stressful to have to deal with USCIS and not know what is going on, why they're making certain decisions. Okay. And yet sometimes the officers can't tell you, especially if it's a USCIS issue. They may not be authorized to tell you. Right? Okay, so let's get back to some news. So if you have TPS from Honduras or Nicaragua, I am so sorry, but Department of Homeland Security has decided to terminate that TPS because apparently things are so much better in those countries that they no longer require TPS. That's basically anyone that has TPS is most likely going to lose TPS at some point in the next year or two, because of the argument that things are so much better in these countries and TPS is no longer necessary, which I don't agree with. And most people that deal in international affairs do not agree that things are so much better in Haiti, so much better in Nicaragua, so much better in Honduras, that these TPS is no longer necessary. So that is something we're going to continue to see with this administration, is ending programs, as many programs as they possibly can. And with the, cloaking it in, this is no longer necessary. This country doesn't need the US, or these individuals don't need these programs. Again, whether that is the truth or not is debatable, right? We know there's so much more to everything. There's so much more to it. Next thing to note is the big, I hate calling it that, but the new bill, the one big beautiful bill, and the immigration things in it. Right? Let's talk about the fees, because the fees for some of these things have changed. It has increased, especially if you are in immigration court proceedings. I am so sorry, but you are going to get way more fees than before, right? You're going to have to pay more for certain things. So if you are filing for asylum, you are going to have to pay $100 fee for your asylum application. And right, not only are you paying $100 fee to file the application, you are also now going to have to pay $100 for every single year that your asylum case is pending, whether it is your fault or not. So this is the part that really makes me upset with this whole thing, is having a yearly fee when USCIS is so backlogged with asylum cases, that cases from 2017, 2018 are not even getting interviews yet. Immigration court is so backlogged that I still have cases from 2016 2016 that weren't completed yet. Okay? So that is not the applicant's fault that USCIS or immigration court is taking so long to process their application. But now they have to pay for every single year that it takes USCIS or the immigration court to complete their case. So this leads to, okay, this leads to people maybe not being able to apply for asylum within the 1 year deadline, which makes it harder for them to get asylum. In addition to now paying $100 for the application, they now have to pay $550 for the first EAD, so the work permit. So when you apply for asylum, you can apply for a work permit after 150 days of your asylum case pending. And before this bill, there was no fee for that initial application because, again, the understanding is that when someone is coming to the U.S. seeking asylum, they do not have the resources, especially since they can't even apply for a work permit for 150 days after they apply for asylum. They may not have resources to pay for a work permit. But when they go to renew that work permit, it's expected that they already started working and they can afford the renewal fees. That was the understanding. But no, according to this bill, someone that comes to the US seeking asylum with nothing is supposed to be able to afford $550 to apply for an initial work permit. And the initial work permit, when a person doesn't have employment and is not legally able to work in the US, is now going to cost more than a renewal of a work permit. Okay, so the initial application is $550. The renewal is $275. So the person that's already working is going to pay less than the person that's not even authorized to work. Okay. And then I also want to mention, if you need an I-94, let's say you use your I-94, or you want an I-94 from USCIS or CBP, you need to pay $20 for that. Used to be free. But that's just what we have to deal with now. Special juvenile applications, so SIJ applications, now have a $250 fee. Remember, these are children that were abandoned or neglected by their parents that now have to pay a fee to process their application, and that application is based on the fact that they were neglected and abandoned by their parents. Now they have a filing fee. And sometimes these, when I say children, I mean children, okay? Under 18, I've had some under 10, okay? So now they have to pay a fee for that application. If you are in immigration court, you get even more fees than everyone else. So adjustment of status outside of immigration court is $1,140. In immigration court is $1,500. And then if you want to file a waiver while in immigration court, it is now $1,050. TPS applications are now $500. Again, if you're filing these in immigration court, okay, not outside of immigration court, because we know that if you're filing a 601 waiver with USCIS, there is a fee for that, okay? For cancellation of removal in immigration court for lawful permanent residents, the filing fee is $600. It used to be less. It used to be like 100 and something. Cancellation of removal for non-permanent residents is now $1,500. Again, the fee used to be $100 and something. Now it's $1,500. And then if you miss your court date, maybe you didn't get a notice that you had a court hearing, or you moved and you never got your you never got anything showing that you have a hearing, there is now a fee for missing that court hearing. You are now going to be charged $5,000 because you missed the court hearing and the judge ordered you to be deported. So just because you missed your court hearing, the judge ordered you to be deported, you now have a $5,000 fee that you have to pay. And that is even if you ask your case to be reopened and the court says, no, we're not going to reopen your case, you would still have that fee. Okay, so big. If you want to appeal your case, let's say you go through immigration court and the judge denies your case and you want to appeal, this is now $900. It was nothing before. Now it's $900 to appeal your case. If you filed a case with USCIS and you want to appeal that case, it is now $900 as well. If you file a motion to reopen or reconsider based on immigration judge's decision or the Board of Immigration Appeals decision, it is also $900. So any motions to reopen or reconsider any appeals now has a $900 fee. So when I tell people that the point of this whole thing, right, the point of these fees is to basically get as many people as possible to not apply things that you qualify for, okay? Because in order to apply for asylum, you have to qualify for asylum, right? That's the minimum requirement. Qualify for asylum. Now, not only do you have to qualify for asylum, you have to have the money to pay for things. And oh yeah, remember how like some applications you can do a fee waiver for? There's no waiver. So asylum application, no fee waiver. The work permit, if you're filing based on asylum, no fee waiver. So every single thing on this new bill that has a fee or increases a fee, there's no fee waiver available. So even if you do not have the funds to pay for these things, you are still expected to pay for it regardless of your financial situation. Okay, so that is part of the reason immigration attorneys and people that just care about immigrants, we're very vocal on our hate for this bill and how much it just changes the dynamics of immigration law and what people can actually qualify for. Because now we're not just going to look at, do you qualify for these things? It's also, can you afford to pay for this thing? Okay. I do a lot of pro bono work with nonprofits in my area, and that is one of the biggest things that they now have to worry about is the fact that their pro bono clients that literally don't have the funds are now not able to apply for a work permit that would then be able to give them the funds to live. So we are in the non-immigrant community, in the nonprofit community, a lot of conversations about how to help people fund these things because one, nonprofits are losing funding. So they're not even able to do as much as they would have before they lost a lot of their funding. So really, really important that you know what these fees are and that you are aware of them and prepare for them. Because if you are in a situation where you have to pay these fees, you may want to start now talking to family and friends and seeing if there is a way, right? If there is a way that they can help you cover these things, because it's going to get increasingly more expensive for people to file for immigration benefits in the US. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. I am more than happy to respond to your questions. I know I did go through a lot of things, but please feel free to put your questions in the comments. one thing I do want to say, because I see a lot of fear, is applications are still being approved, okay? Marriage-based green card applications, parent-child applications, those are still being approved. It's not like USCIS just stopped functioning. They are stricter with certain things, and you do want to make sure that you are providing as much evidence as possible to prove your relationship, to prove your marriage. But just know, those applications are still being approved. I think a couple weeks ago, I had 2 interviews in one day with the same officer. Both of those were approved. I had one last week. What am I talking about? I had one on Monday. I said last week. On Monday. That's how many interviews I've had, like, back to back. But I had one on Monday that was approved. So it is getting approved. All right. It is getting approved. You can get your applications approved, but you have to make sure that you are, looking at your whole situation and making sure that you have the evidence to back up your relationship. And one thing I also want to mention is I did a video a while back on red flags on cases. Just because your case has red flags does not mean that your marriage is not real. I feel like I always have to say this because people always confuse the two. Just because I say, oh, this is a red flag, does not mean that your case cannot be approved, right? Age red flags can be overcome by actually being able to show the officer that your marriage is real and having a solid interview. Okay, when you have a solid interview and you have solid evidence of your relationship, your red flags, like an age gap, can be overcome. Okay, and you can get your application approved in like a couple days after your interview because you took those steps to make sure you're prepared for your interview and you're presenting enough evidence of your relationship. Okay, so even with this administration, cases are being approved, people are getting their green cards, and marriage-based applications, especially because that's sometimes what people are so worried about is their marriage-based applications. Those are still definitely getting approved. And you just have to make sure, right? Just have to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make it easy for the officer. That's really the key, right? You want to make it easy for the officer to look at your case and say, yes, I believe that this marriage is real. They are on top of everything. So one thing that happened at an interview like a couple months ago was the officer literally looked at the pictures that the couple had, and there was one picture that stood out to them. One of the couples was in the hospital, and the officer just zeroed in on that picture and was like, oh, what happened with this? Why was, who was in the hospital? What happened with this situation? And the answers, they were able to explain to the officer who was sick, why they were sick, who drove them to the hospital. Answers matched. The same thing, and the officer, just based on that, right? When a spouse is sick and you know exactly what happened with them, you took them to the hospital, you made sure they took their medication, all of those things, you may see it as just a day in your life, but an officer may see that and just zero in on it because they know those are the things that people don't really think about, right? Those are the things that just happens in your life. And the more you can be able to answer questions about your day-to-day life, the better chances are that you can get your application approved. Again, even if you have a red flag, okay? All right, so remember, if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'm just going to quickly go over the updates again, and then if I see any questions, I will answer those. If not, then we are going to have a short live today, okay? So first off, just know that the visa restrictions are still a thing. More countries are most likely going to get restrictions. So know that, prepare for it. If you are a company outside of the US that usually sends your people to the US, please plan ahead, because you may be in a situation where you want to send your people to the US very quickly and you're not going to be able to. And side note, I was having a conversation with my husband the other day, and this, right, on the flip side, could be an opportunity for someone that has a US passport or a passport that allows them to come in and out of the US to work for a company in one of those countries that sends their employees to the US. So you're on a jump hop, you know, if you're hunting for a job and you want to be outside of the US, you may want to look at those countries too and use the fact that you are a US citizen or that you are in another country that has, you know, visa access to the US as a plus on your application. Just a quick job hunt tip there. Use what you have to get where you want to be, okay? So that's number one. There's going to be visa restrictions. It may be that you're in a situation where you're under that visa restriction. You want to know about it. You want to make sure you are prepared for it. Okay, do not overstay your visa, especially if you know you're going to want to keep coming in and out of the US. So do not overstay your visa, because that's the quickest way. Even if you overstay your visa for a day, that is the quickest way to not get a new visa issued to you. Okay? And then as far as the visa bulletin, just know that there are some movements for F2A and F4. So if you happen to be in those categories, go and look at the August visa bulletin, because you may, you know, depending on when you filed, you may be in a situation where you now are able to file for your green card if you're in the US and then status, or you are outside of the US. You may be getting that email from the National Visa Center really soon telling you to start applying for your DS-260 and your affidavit of support. So it's really important that if you are not an immediate relative of a US citizen and you have a case pending, so you're waiting for an interview or you are, you know, still waiting for USCIS to process your I-130, pay attention to the visa bulletin. Like, if nothing else, pay attention to the visa bulletin, because that's what's going to tell you when your case could possibly come up. All right, don't bother, right? Don't bother your petitioner, because they can't do anything about a visa not being available. All right, so again, if you are not an immediate relative of a US citizen, which are their children under the age of 21 that are unmarried, and their spouse and their parents, that's it. Those are the only immediate relatives of US citizens. If you are not one of those things, you are in a preference category, which means you cannot even get a visa interview until a visa is available. You cannot even start filing your visa application until the National Visa Center tells you, okay, you are now in a good window to start applying. Do not bother your petitioner, because they cannot do anything to speed that up. All right, the only time a petitioner can speed up a visa application is if the visa, right, if your visa priority date is already current, but you're not scheduled for an interview yet, or you haven't received the email from the National Visa Center, that is the only time that your petitioner can actually do something. But if you are still like years away from your priority date being current, you just have to be patient and wait, okay? And then finally, TPS for Honduras and excuse me. Oh my goodness. Yep. TPS for Honduras and Nicaragua was terminated by by Department of Homeland Security because they believe that things are so much better in those countries and they no longer need TPS. I don't agree, but you know, the people that have TPS from those countries don't agree. But you know, DHS controls all of that, so we wait and see. All right, Malik, 60 days after interview, no decision. Again, it's going to be the same answer as last time. Contact your congressperson, service request with USCIS. Those are really your only options. If after your interview, it's been 60 days and nothing, is contact your congressperson and or do a service request. Typically, like I said, in my office, we do 90 days because that's just what we have found to be a sweet spot, especially when reaching out to Congress people. They just want to know how long has it been, and we have noticed that when it's in that 90-day period, they're more gung-ho about helping. So those are your options. Reach out to a congressperson and then service request with USCIS. But just know, if your case is still within normal processing time, you may not be able to file a service request. So then your option would be to reach out to your congressperson and let them do it on your behalf. Because they typically have a liaison with USCIS that can reach out to them and get more information, if at all possible. Because if they're just processing the application, they may just tell the congressperson that. Okay. But beyond that, there's not much you can do, unfortunately. All right. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. If not, I don't see any other questions, we are going to end the stream. And I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you have questions and you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and put it in the comments. If you want to schedule a private consultation with me where we talk about your situation and what you qualify for, what you can do about your specific situation, feel free to go to my website, legal.com, and click on Contact Us, where you can actually pick a date and time that works best for you for us to chat about your case. And when you schedule that appointment, you will be meeting with me, okay? I always want to say that because sometimes people get on the call and they're not sure if they're meeting with me or someone else. I am the person you're going to meet with when you schedule a strategy session. And our strategy sessions are free, but we also have like a paid, more detailed consultation as well. So when you go on the website, you'll be able to pick which option works best for you, okay? But either way, you will be meeting with me, and we will talk about your situation and what you qualify for, how we can help you, and what steps you can take to make whatever your immigration goals are happen. All right. So thank y'all so much for joining me. I do not see any questions, so thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Please bring your questions, okay? It's always funner when you have questions, all right? And it's always more fun when you have questions. So please go ahead, bring your questions next week, and we will talk about all the immigration things that are going on. All right. Thank y'all so much, and have a great Friday and a great weekend.